Over 9,000 contacts of people exposed to COVID-19 traced and 12 molecular laboratories activated in less than 2 months is undoubtedly a huge feat by the Federal Ministry of Health in its efforts to stop the spread of the coronavirus. But logistic challenges and low turnout for testing in most of its recently activated laboratories remain major problems. The Director General of the Nigeria Center for Disease Control, Dr. Chikwe Ekwazu, explained that the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 briefing in Abuja that it's limiting the agency's ability to reach its daily testing target.
The Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 begins its daily briefing in Abuja, with the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, who doubles as the Chairman of the Task Force, acknowledging a donation from the European Union.
In furtherance of the support Nigeria has been receiving, the European Union delegation to Nigeria met with Mr. President this morning and contributed the sum of 50 million euros, which will be channeled through the One COVID-19 Basket Fund, which was launched here some time ago, to facilitate rapid procurement of equipment, consumables, supporting socio-economic interventions for vulnerable groups, and other aspects of treatment and critical care continuum.
The Minister of Health addresses the gathering about contact tracing and efforts to scale up testing for COVID-19.
We have made significant progress in contact tracing and have to date followed up over 9,000 persons of interest, most of whom have exceeded their 14 days of observation period. We have increased daily testing capacity by activating more COVID-19 capable laboratories and shall work with the private sector to outsource and diversify sample collection sites and also improve logistics support.
According to the Ministry of Health, 12 molecular laboratories have been activated across the country, yet the ministry is contending with a huge logistics challenge that limits it from reaching its target to test 4,000 persons for COVID-19 per day.
Our target, following Mr. President's speech, is to get to 2,000 samples a day in Lagos, 1,000 in Abuja, and 1,000 for the rest of the country. The challenge is no longer with the labs, at least not now. The challenge we have now is a process engineering challenge. How do we make the entire food chain work better? It's no longer about capacity. There are enough vehicles. Both the federal government and the state government has done everything possible to release the resources required for the response. Our challenge now is how to connect the dots, how to make the response more efficient.
The fear of community transmission of the
Fielding answers to a question from Channel's correspondent about how the ministry intends to manage possible community transmission of the virus in the face of weak national primary healthcare system, the Minister of Health had this to say.
The primary healthcare center is definitely not a treatment center. It is not where you are supposed to treat coronavirus. In fact, if you do see a case that's suspicious, you are advised to invite that person to a holding facility and call for help. We are trying to arrange now a transport system by which anyone who is a suspect can in fact be taken for testing or taken to what we call an isolation warm center where people can reside until a test is done to prove whether they are positive or negative.
From a singular case of COVID-19 that was reported in February 27 this year, the number of confirmed cases of the virus has continued to rise to over 340, forcing the central and state governments to enforce a lockdown to stop the spread of the virus.
To perfect their crimes.
Meanwhile, the Minister of Foreign Affairs has explained that better communication between the Chinese authorities in Guangzhou and the Nigerian consulate in China would have prevented the escalation of accusations of racism against Nigerians. Mr. Jeffrey Onyama, who was speaking at a news conference in Abuja after a closed-door meeting with the Chinese ambassador, says some Nigerians who got into China on March the 31st tested positive for coronavirus, including a lady who owns a restaurant. Our correspondent, Kayla Megwa, has this report.
The BBC ran a poll in 2014 on how Nigerians view China. The result was over 80% of Nigerians view China's influence positively. making Nigeria the most pro-Chinese nation in the world. So it came as a shock when videos of some Nigerians accusing the Chinese government and the citizens of racism started circulating in the social media.
I don't need to talk to him. If anybody wants to talk to me, he should come here. I don't talk to anybody.
This is coming at a time when Nigerians are skeptical of the arrival of 15 Chinese doctors to help the country in the fight against COVID-19. The outrage moved the Speaker of the House of Representatives to summon the Chinese ambassador Zhu Pingjian.
We continue, like I promised the foreign minister, we take the very... but you have not.
The Chinese ambassador was also summoned to a closed-door meeting with Nigeria's Minister of Foreign Affairs, and they both fielded questions from journalists afterwards on the issue in Guangzhou.
The Chinese authorities obviously picked up on this, that there was this group of people who had tested positive, and so automatically demanded and insisted that they all be quarantined, okay, with nobody allowed to come out, 14 days, that if anybody came out of that quarantine, that they should not be allowed in to, if it was a hotel, back into that hotel or that residence. So they put in very, very strict measures to try to contain this outbreak, which to them at that time clearly seemed to have been within that community.
After the timely intervention of the minister, of the government, Beijing took it very, very seriously. And during the past days, I think the coordination between Beijing and Guangzhou has been strengthened remarkably.
The Nigerian and Chinese governments are doing what they can right now to calm frayed nerves, knowing that reprisal attacks on Chinese nationals living in Nigeria is a situation the country cannot afford at this moment. The call is for the Chinese government to communicate to the Nigerian consulate in China before taking action on Nigerian citizens living there. Kayla Magwa, Channels Television News.
The Nigeria Center for Disease Control has announced 19 new cases of COVID-19, bringing the total number of confirmed cases in the country to 362. 14 of the new cases are in Lagos, 2 in the FCT Abuja, while Akwa Ibom, Edo and Kano State each have 1 case. A breakdown of the cases in each state show that Lagos now has 203 cases, FCT Abuja 50 cases, Osun with 20, that FCT Abuja 58 cases, Osun with 20, Edo State has 16 cases, Oyo 11 cases, 9 in Ogun State, Bauchi and Kaduna have 6 cases each, Akwa Ibom and Katsina 5 cases each, Kwara and Kano now have 4 cases, Ondo and Delta 3 cases each, while Enugu, Ekiti and Rivers each have 2 cases, with Benue, Niger and Anambra recording 1 case each. A total of 99 patients have been discharged, while 11 deaths have been recorded. Still on efforts to contain COVID-19, Nigeria's Inspector General of Police, Mohammed Adamu, has read the Riot Act to officers deployed to enforce the lockdown, as well as criminals who may wish to take advantage of the situation to harass citizens at home. Speaking at the daily news conference by the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 in Abuja, the police boss insists that officers deployed to enforce the lockdown must carry out their duties professionally.
For the deployment of our personnel, we came up with standard operating procedure. And those standard operating procedure were hinged on making sure that those that are not supposed to move are not allowed to move. And those that are allowed to move for essential duties are given unfettered access in terms of movement. And while we are doing that, whether we are restricting movements or allowing movement, we do that with respect to the rights of Nigerian citizens. We've deployed an intervention force to Lagos, Ogun, led by Deputy Inspector General of Police, to deal with the situation. Now we want to again sound a note of warning to criminals that are taking the opportunity of this lockdown to go from place to place, especially in Lagos mainland and any part of this country, to desist from doing that. We have instructed all the commissioners of police, the AIGs in charge of the zonal commands, to deploy all the resources available to them to make sure that criminals are not allowed to take the opportunity of the lockdown.
Now to Lagos State, where the government says it has discharged 9 more patients who have recovered from COVID-19, bringing the total number of discharged patients in Lagos to 70. Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu announced this at a briefing on the state government's response to the coronavirus in Lagos. He adds that the state government has also embarked on community contact tracing.
Patients, 3 female and 6 male, which have all tested negative twice on 2 successive occasions, which will bring the total number of discharged cases to 70 by the close of business today. Besides, we are boosting the capacity of our isolation centers to take up new patients. Overall, across our isolation centers at Yaba, at Onikon, and Luth, we have a capacity that is close to 300. And by next week, we intend to open additional centers at Landmark and the Bagara General Hospital. This, we believe, will give us additional about 220 beds and about 20 intensive care units. In the last 1 week, we have commenced an active search for cases in communities across the state, all with a view to effectively track and trace community transmitted cases. This is important for us to do, as we have seen a trend of community transmission in the number of recently confirmed cases. And with the population density that we have, it is imperative that we begin this next phase of identifying and managing new cases. This means that everyone must continue to stay at home for the next 14 days, except persons exempted by the presidential order. For everyone else, please stay at home. This is not a time to go out jogging or exercise on the empty roads. This is not a time to throw parties of any kind, not even within your house or elsewhere. This is not a time to think of going to a church or a mosque. We can and we must also enjoy our period of worship in the comfort of our home at this time.